Taiwan has had enough. After years of trying to avoid direct confrontation, it's now preparing for war with China. This is a major shift. For decades, Taiwan stayed passive, even as Chinese warships circled and jets violated its airspace. But now the island is rearming, retraining, and publicly drawing red lines. So what exactly has Taiwan done, and how could it reshape one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world? Let's break it down. On the surface, it's a complete mismatch in terms of the two nations' relative size and strength. China has the largest armed forces in the world, with over 2 million active-duty military personnel and 510,000 in reserve. Taiwan has just 215,000 active military personnel, although they are supported by about 1.6 million civilian warriors. Although estimates vary, China also has a ground force of at least 6,800 tanks and 3,490 self-propelled artillery units, while Taiwan has around 888 tanks and 488 self-propelled artillery units. China also has a massive fleet of 234 naval ships and 61 submarines, while Taiwan has just 26 ships and 4 submarines, 3 of which date back to the 1980s or earlier. China's Air Force, the People's Liberation Army or PLA Air Force, has over 3,309 warplanes, including the J-20 fifth-generation stealth fighter. Taiwan, on the other hand, has only 761 military aircraft, with the most modern being upgraded fourth-generation US-made F-16s. China's defense budget in 2024 was around $408 billion, while Taiwan's was approximately $19 billion, meaning the gap between the two is only likely to grow. China has long held that Taiwan is its property and reunification is inevitable, whether that happens peacefully or the island nation is taken by force. And it's fair to say that without massive support from the US, which in principle supports the One China policy, but in practice acts as a highly visible backstop for Taiwan's steadfast independence, China would probably have invaded and taken over Taiwan already. But in recent months, particularly since the administration of President Donald Trump took office in January 2025, the US has signaled a changing strategy towards Taiwan and China, which suggests a reluctance to put boots on the ground should China launch an invasion. Taiwan is still awaiting around $20 billion in advanced weaponry it bought from the US from 2021 to 2023, with delivery delayed due to the US's ongoing commitments to the conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East. Simultaneously, China has ramped up the pressure significantly, with a string of massive military exercises around the island and a major escalation of so-called grey zone aggression, which we'll discuss shortly. But in the face of these seemingly disadvantageous developments, Taiwan's leadership hasn't backed down. Rather, it's responded defiantly, with a series of political, economic, and military countermoves of its own. President Lai Ching-te has certainly upped the ante in recent weeks, but this new, more confrontational attitude towards China actually began with his predecessor, Tsai Ing-wen. Taiwan has been independent from China since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, when Republican leader Chiang Kai-shek fled the mainland in the face of Mao Zedong's communist onslaught on the island, then called Formosa, which is just 110 miles across the Straits of Taiwan. But China has always seen Taiwan as an integral part of China, a renegade province that needs to be brought under control by force if necessary. For decades, tensions ran high between the Chinese Communist Party on the mainland and the authoritarian Kuomintang administration that ruled Taiwan with an iron fist until 1986. But relations then began to thaw during the administration of democratically elected President Mao Ying-jeou, which saw the signing of 23 agreements or memoranda of understanding between Taiwan and the mainland, including economic and public safety-related pacts. But all that changed when Tsai and the Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, took office in 2016. She more or less shredded the so-called 1992 consensus, which the Ma administration had interpreted as one China with respective interpretations. She emphasized strengthening Taiwan's international presence and bolstering ties with allies like the US and Japan, while publicly speaking out against the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, a preferential trade agreement that increased economic links between Taiwan and mainland China. Tsai also highlighted China's domestic problems and international pressure as deterrents to any potential invasion, stating that China was unlikely to attempt an invasion due to its overwhelming domestic challenges. This defiantly independent new attitude was not taken too kindly by the CCP, which steadily increased the aggression in rhetoric, economic and diplomatic pressure, and militarily. In response to China's increasing military aggression, Tsai dramatically upgraded the military by raising its budget each year, supporting domestic defense projects like manufacturing submarines, reforming Taiwan's reserve system with an all-out defense mobilization agency, and extending conscription for young men between the ages of 18 and 36 from 4 months to 1 year. The situation took a dangerous turn following then U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan on August 2nd and 3rd, 2022. The visit provoked a furious reaction from Beijing. Dubbed the Fourth Taiwan Strait Crisis, the Chinese response included a series of forceful and coercive military, economic, and diplomatic measures that began before Pelosi even arrived. They dispatched drones over Taiwan's Dongyin Island on July 28th, the first time China had used UAVs against Taiwan. Then PLA aircraft flew close to the Taiwan Strait centerline on the day Pelosi landed, August 2nd, while several civilian flights at multiple airports in Fujian province were cancelled, suggesting that China was clearing the airspace in the Taiwan Strait to engage in military operations. These actions were designed to scare Pelosi off, but they failed. So the PLA rapidly transitioned to a range of military operations against the island, including live-fire rocket and missile launches on August 4th, and significant joint military operations from August 4th to August 7th. At the same time, China stepped up air intrusions against Kinmen and Matsu, Taiwan's offshore islands located close to China. These actions were accompanied by an aggressive disinformation operation to exaggerate the extent and scale of China's capabilities. Fortunately, the heightened state of tension didn't escalate into anything more kinetic, but the dial was ratcheted up several notches again in March and April 2023 when Tsai transited through the US, meeting with Kevin McCarthy, who had replaced Pelosi as Speaker of the House. China again responded firmly, although this time with a more nuanced approach. First, Beijing appears to have timed a 12-day visit to China by former President Ma to coincide with Tsai's US transit, the first time a former or sitting Taiwan president had traveled to mainland China. Under Ma, as we've noted, Taiwan had been on a much less confrontational path with China. China also then poached one of Taiwan's few remaining diplomatic partners, Honduras, reportedly offering the Caribbean nation up to $2.95 billion to establish diplomatic relations with them instead. This was the 9th country that China had enticed to switch diplomatic ties from Taiwan to China during Tsai's presidency alone, the others being São Tomé and Príncipe, Panama, El Salvador, the Dominican Republic, Burkina Faso, the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, and Nicaragua. A further 9 nations had been lured to the red side during the administration of President Chen Shui-bian, who preceded Ma as president: North Macedonia, Liberia, Dominica, Vanuatu, Senegal, Grenada, Chad, Costa Rica, and Malawi. Gambia had been persuaded to switch sides during Ma's term, and Nauru has subsequently joined these nations. This list is not exactly jam-packed with heavy hitters, but each has a vote in the United Nations General Assembly and previously had aligned with Taiwan. As it had during Pelosi's visit, China again launched disinformation campaigns, mostly targeting Tsai, including paying pro-China demonstrators to protest outside her hotels and venues. It also introduced sanctions against multiple US and Taiwan organizations and individuals, such as the Hudson Institute and the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library that hosted her in the US. And again, China beefed up the military threat. The PLA had 7 days of large-scale military exercises in 7 zones surrounding Taiwan. These exercises involved 12 PLA naval vessels and 91 aircraft, the highest one-day total of PLA aircraft recorded near Taiwan. The PLA also took the unprecedented step of launching ballistic missiles over and near Taiwan, 5 of which fell into Japan's exclusive economic zone. Moreover, unlike previous escalations against Taiwan, the PLA did not announce specific coordinates for its main exercises and commenced the exercises the same day they were announced, providing no warning. Tensions continued simmering in the aftermath, but have recently been coming to a boil since Lai took center stage in May 2024, having won an unprecedented 3rd consecutive election for the DPP. On May 15th, Tsai signed off flamboyantly with a group of drag queens parading through the presidential office building. 2 days later, a real riot erupted in Taiwan's legislature as lawmakers traded insults and punches over a bill that would heighten scrutiny powers over the government, and tens of thousands protested in the street. When Lai finally took office on May 20th, his inauguration speech angered Beijing to the point that it dispatched fighter jets and warships as a demonstration of its ability to seize power. That's been a common theme throughout Lai's presidency, Lai saying and doing things that are followed by an aggressive response from China. On October 14, 2024, the PLA launched military drills codenamed Joint Sword 2024B, involving the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force in the Taiwan Strait and areas to the north, south, and east of Taiwan. It was designed as a stern warning against the actions of Taiwan's independence forces. That seems to have been a direct response to Lai's National Day speech on October 10th and another at the celebration party on October 5th, despite these being regarded as reserved by most analysts. Then from December 9th to 11th, the PLA conducted what spokesperson Sun Li-Fang of the Taiwanese Ministry of National Defense, MND for short, described as the largest-scale activity around Taiwan since the 1996 Taiwan Strait crisis. MND Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence Hashaiji Sheng added that the scale of the vessels dispatched this time was staggering, with their range extending from the first to the second island chain. Nearly 90 vessels are believed to have been involved in these drills, which were again not pre-announced by the PLA. But these and other provocations don't seem to have dissuaded Lai at all from his path, and now he seems to have taken his most defiant steps yet. On February 14, 2025, he called China a foreign hostile force and proposed 17 new national security measures designed to improve the nation's resilience and defense against the Chinese threat. Lai's speech drew an immediate reaction from Beijing, who called him a destroyer of cross-straits peace and a creator of crisis. So what do these new security measures entail, and how might they change the situation? One of the most controversial measures is the proposal to restore a military court system as a response to the increasing number of Chinese gray zone attacks, which include infiltration of government, military, and society. The military court system will prosecute military crimes as sedition, aiding the enemy, leaking confidential information, dereliction of duty, or disobedience. In a similar vein are proposals to revise regulations for retirement benefits and penalties for expressions of loyalty to China by military personnel, enhanced scrutiny of Taiwanese citizens applying for identification documents in China, especially military personnel, civil servants, and educators, implement stricter requirements for Chinese nationals applying for permanent residency in Taiwan, prohibiting dual identity status, and adjust residency systems for individuals from Hong Kong or Macau. On the face of it, some of these might seem to be bordering on the petty, but China's infiltration of Taiwanese leadership, economic and military structures is a growing problem, with several prominent DPP lawmakers being implicated in espionage for China in 2025 alone. Sheng Chu-ying, a former assistant to several DPP lawmakers, was released on bail in March as authorities continued investigating allegations that he was recruited by Chinese intelligence during a trip to China. And in April, DPP member Hou Zhenqie was detained and held incommunicado on suspicion of spying for China during his tenure as assistant to then Minister of Foreign Affairs Joseph Wu. Former DPP member Huang Qujing, a former assistant to New Taipei City Councillor Li Yutian, is another who's been implicated by prosecutors in espionage for China. He is alleged to have also recruited his friend Chiu Shiyuan, former deputy director of the DPP's Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, and Wu Shangyu, who served as secretary to President William Lai during his vice presidency, then worked as presidential office staff consultant after Lai assumed the presidency. But infiltrating and subverting the Taiwanese halls of power is not the only area where Chinese gray zone tactics are at play. Lai also proposed to strengthen measures against cognitive warfare and cybersecurity threats via AI, internet applications, and other tools. That's because propaganda and cognitive warfare have long been one of China's main weapons against Taiwan, the main aim of which has been to try and sway the Taiwanese population away from independence-mindedness and make them more amenable to integration into China. But if anything, it's had the opposite effect. A 2024 poll showed that the overwhelming majority, some 76% of Taiwanese, see themselves as Taiwanese, not Chinese. Only 9% feel that they're basically the same people. While the main opposition parties favor less confrontational relations with the mainland, the fact that the DPP has now won 3 elections in a row indicates that the majority deeply value their independence and democratic values. Not that that stopped China from trying to sway them. In April, Taiwan's National Security Bureau, or NSB, reported that they had recorded 510,000 instances of controversial information being spread online by the CCP in the first quarter of 2025 alone, up from the 442,652 identified in the first quarter of 2024. The CCP has been trying to divide Taiwanese society by commenting on controversial issues such as Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company's recent announcement of an additional $100 billion investment in the US, the Bureau said. The information was mostly found on Facebook, where 3,600 suspicious accounts were identified, as well as forum sites PTT and Dcard, and on X, and increasingly TikTok. In addition, according to the report, China uses state-run media, private accounts, cyber army groups, and public relations firms to manipulate public opinion, and there has been a marked increase in the use of AI to generate and spread misinformation. The CCP also repeatedly attempts to hack and steal data from Taiwanese governmental organizations, critical infrastructure, and technology companies. Since the beginning of 2024, the government's service network registered a daily average of 2.19 million cyber attacks, mostly from China. Taiwan's healthcare sector, in particular, has suffered from a series of ransomware attacks, with hackers stealing data to sell on online forums. Information is then spread online about these ransomware attacks to destabilize social order and create public anxiety. Similarly, Chinese hackers have also stolen data from the government and national defense sector, which is then repackaged, sensationalized, and repeatedly resold, aiming to damage the government's credibility. What this all means is that for Taiwan, defending the hearts and minds of its population against Chinese aggression is arguably just as important as defending its territory. And in this regard, Lai's 17-point plan goes some way to shore up defenses and take the offensive to China. Defending the territory itself is a much trickier affair, given the huge disparity in military power, despite having the world's most powerful military, the US, in its corner. China's most recent massive drills in response to Lai's 17-point plan shows that it does have the ability to more or less blockade the islands by sea and air for significant periods. Experts such as the Rand Corporation suggest that in the event of a Chinese invasion, it would take up to 90 days for the US to mobilize and deliver a powerful enough force to successfully deliver a crushing defeat. China is just 140 miles away, while the bulk of the US's might is on the other side of the Pacific Ocean after all. But there's every reason to be confident that Taiwan could successfully hold the fort until the US arrives in full force, despite being akin to St. George and his trusty sword facing off against the massive, fire-breathing monster. That's in part down to Taiwan's defense-friendly geography. Taiwan features a hostile, mountainous terrain, particularly around its densely populated urban areas, which make attacks difficult. There are only a few beaches suitable for landing, and these are mostly on the west coast, which has shallow waters. That means invasion craft would have to moor further out to sea to disembark personnel, making them sitting ducks for Taiwan's air and sea defenses, which include US Patriot air defense systems, Tian-Kung or Skybow surface-to-air anti-ballistic missiles, and Xiongfen anti-ship missile systems. But it's also down to a strategy co-developed with the US and dubbed the porcupine defense, or lots of little things, which is being turbocharged by Lai. Taiwan's small size and compact infrastructure make it particularly vulnerable to China's vast array of air and sea-based missiles. There are only 4 main power plants, for example, which are all low-hanging fruit for Chinese missiles once the Patriot air defense missiles have all been fired. This vulnerability limits the effectiveness of expensive legacy systems on which Taiwan continues to spend 2.5% of its GDP. In 2023, Taiwan ordered $1.55 billion in weapons and services from the US, including infrared tracking systems for F-16 jets, munitions, spare parts for aircraft, and technical support. In October 2024, the US approved another $2 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, including, for the first time, NASAM's surface-to-air missiles and advanced radar systems. Other purchases during Tsai's tenure included drones, anti-tank munition systems, Paladin medium self-propelled howitzer artillery systems, AIM-9X Sidewinder air-to-air missiles, Stinger surface-to-air missiles, Mark 48 Mod 6 advanced technology heavyweight torpedoes, and AGM-154C JSOW air-to-ground missiles. However, these are low-cost, highly effective asymmetric warfare steps that Taiwan is taking to impede and disrupt the Chinese invasion until the US cavalry arrives. Somewhat ironically, asymmetric warfare was also used successfully by Mao Zedong to defeat Chiang Kai-shek and the Republic of China's military in the 1940s, leading its nationalist government to retreat to Taiwan and setting the stage for today's tensions. The idea is to make any military assault so difficult, challenging, and bloody that PLA will consider the cost of invasion too high, not to mention the risk of turning Beijing into a global pariah. For example, Taiwan could create artificial reefs offshore, either by sinking defunct ships or placing large, hollow shapes made of concrete or other durable materials. If they tried to maneuver around these impediments, Chinese ships or landing craft would run aground, sustain damage, or become immobilized and highly vulnerable at a critical moment. Similarly, Taiwan could place rows of anti-vehicle obstacles on the beaches themselves. A second approach entails the use of naval mines. In addition to inflicting a body count of PLA vessels, mines could have a powerful effect in terms of delaying and disrupting the invasion force. And each mine only costs around 1/100th of the cost of an anti-ship ballistic missile. A third complementary approach is the so-called scorched earth tactic. By sabotaging equipment, tearing up roads and runways, embedding landmines, placing booby traps, installing malware and other methods, Taiwan could greatly extend the timelines needed to restore those key nodes. It could extend them even further by targeted attacks on reconstruction crews from concealed positions nearby. These and other guerrilla tactics could make an invasion such a nightmare for the PLA that they just go home before the US military arrives in full force. But most experts agree, the key to any successful defense would be a strong, united, defiant population, willing to fight tooth and nail for their homeland, just like the Ukrainians have in the face of Russia's invasion. And perhaps more than any purely military steps that could be taken, that could be a critical component in standing up to the dragon. But what do you think? Is Taiwan doing the right thing by getting more confrontational with China? Can it successfully defend itself against a Chinese invasion, with or without the US's support? Let us know in the comments, and thank you as always for watching.